For Krima Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dlamini, political analyst of Rimajiki, discusses post-Sona blues. So during this year's Sona, Cyril Ramaphosa, our president, started off by addressing the two issues. One, the Eskom unbundling, as well as the accusations that were leveled against him. Was this necessary?
Starting with the allegation that was made by COPE leader, Mosiua Lekota, that President Cyril Ramaphosa, when they were students in the 70s, sold them out. It was very painful to watch our head of state having to defend his struggle record. Now, those against whom allegations of spying for the apartheid state or those against whom allegations of selling out has been made and have been made incorrectly or dishonestly or with a political agenda behind them, will tell you how painful that is. Because people make many sacrifices during the struggle, and only to find that at the end you are accused of having tried to undermine the struggle. There was a point where I thought he was going to break down and cry. So it was painful to watch. But what it highlights is the broader issue of the extent to which the ANC was infiltrated during apartheid, and the extent to which those who infiltrated the ANC, who worked for the apartheid regime, now occupy senior leadership positions in the ruling party and in our government. That question arises. And another question which arises is whether it matters. Because it seems we are willing to forgive the perpetrators of the heinous crime of apartheid with indecent alacrity at times. But we're not willing to forgive those who were part of the struggle, against whom allegations of either spying for the apartheid regime or of having been askaris and so on is concerned. Now, of course, we will never know what the truth is. I would have hoped that Mosiua Lekota would repeat what he said outside Parliament. The fact that he hid behind parliamentary privilege, I think, downgraded the veracity of his claim and reinforced the perception that he is becoming increasingly erratic in his behavior.
If we look at the overall assessment of the ANC in government in the context of the past 25 years, why do you say there is a gap between procedural and substantive dimensions of democracy?
Well, the ANC concedes that too, that it has done much better when it comes to the delivery of constitutional rights, democratic rights and freedoms such as freedom of expression, freedom of the media, the right to vote every 5 years. It concedes that when it comes to that which we refer to as the procedural dimension of our democracy, it has done well. It concedes, though, that when it comes to the capacity of a democracy to deliver a better life, particularly with regard to reconfiguring and re-engineering the structure of the South African economy to be an economy that delivers much more than it does to those who are oppressed during apartheid. The ANC has not done as well. So that's the gap I'm talking about. That when it comes to what has been promised and what the ANC has been promising since 1994, and compared to what it has actually delivered, we have seen, especially after 2004, a widening gap between the procedural dimension and the substantive dimension of our democracy.
You are talking about the objective factors beyond the control of the ruling party. You are saying that the ANC has not performed optimally. Which factors are you referring to?
Well, look at the performance of the global economy and how it has affected the ANC government and other governments all over the world. In 1997, we had the Asian flu, which hit the global economy. A decade later, you had the global financial crisis, which became a global economic crisis, which the world has not fully recovered from. There were signs of recovery. This time last year, we were talking about synchronized growth. We're not talking about synchronized growth in the global economy at the moment, because it would seem that the global economy going forward in the foreseeable future will be slowing down. Some are even talking about the possibility of another global recession. In this climate and how this has affected the South African economy, the apartheid state has not been able to deliver optimally. But of course, there is an extent to which the ANC has made injudicious policy choices in the economy. There are instances when it has shown lack of courage when it comes to restructuring the South African economy. And that is the subjective level. It must take full blame for the gaps that have developed because of its lack of courage and some of the injudicious policy choices it has made.
Why is it important, Aubrey, that with each SONA, irrespective of which political party is in power, that we need to ask ourselves that to what extent does that SONA take us closer to the goal of the society that is qualitatively better than the antithesis of apartheid society?
Well, we must always go back to what the struggle against colonialism and apartheid was about, or the struggle against apartheid colonialism was about. It was about the creation of a society which in gender, social, political and economic terms would be the antithesis, would be the opposite of apartheid society. Now, if we achieve that, it means then another struggle begins. It is the struggle for the creation of a society that is qualitatively better even than that society, which is the opposite of apartheid society we have succeeded in creating. Now, that second part is an ongoing and eternal, because every time you succeed, you must create a society that is better than what came before. That's an ongoing struggle. So when you listen to the finance minister and you listen to the State of the Nation address, one of the questions you must ask is whether these speeches take us closer or not to the goal of creating a society, first of all, that is the opposite of apartheid society, and secondly, a society that is qualitatively better even than that opposite of apartheid society. In my view, from the second decade of democracy, we've been succeeding less and less with regard to these two goals.
Why are you saying that no speech, including the recent SONA, has bridged the gap between the words of the president and what they describe?
Well, my starting point, again, when I listen to any speech, or I read any speech, or I read a policy document, my starting point is that words are not what they describe. So the word stone is not a stone. So the words expropriation of land without compensation are not expropriation of land without compensation. So the struggle is to narrow the gap between words and what they mean. And at the moment, what I find when I listen to the State of the Nation address, when I listen to the budget, are two things. That the gap between words and what they describe is not narrowing. In some cases, it is widening. And secondly, the State of the Nation address tells us very little about the state of the nation. There is an extent to which the State of the Nation address is a pipe dream in relation to the state of the nation. But of course, there are portions of the South African nation for whom the words of the State of the Nation address may be reality, to the extent that there are portions of the South African population that are doing much better today than they did before 1994. Unfortunately, it is not those who were oppressed during apartheid. And
lastly, Aubrey, as a political analyst, what were you expecting from the recent Sona?
I was expecting exactly what I heard. It's a speech that does not speak to me. It's a speech that does not speak to South African citizens, particularly those who were oppressed during apartheid. It is a speech that speaks more eloquently to the concerns of ratings agencies, capital, international investors, and so on. It's a speech that speaks more to constituencies that will never speak, that will never vote for the ANC, I mean, even if it was led by Jesus Christ or the Prophet Muhammad, peace be with him. So the ANC keeps on pandering to constituencies that will never vote for it at the expense of constituencies that continue to vote for it, which means for the constituencies that continue to vote for it, voting for the ANC continues to be an act of disenfranchisement.
That was political analyst Aubrey Majigqi speaking to Crema Media's Polity about Post-Sona Blues.